fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show. The Radical Fundamental Principles.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday. It's afternoon for you guys, mostly. I'm here in Tbilisi, Georgia, where it is late at night, so a little tired. So we'll see how long we go today. But it is 10 o'clock here in Georgia, and we're 8 hours ahead of the East Coast. We are 11 hours ahead of the West Coast, and haven't done a show in a while, so I figured I'd do a show today. Hopefully sound is good. Give me a thumbs up if it is. Hopefully video's coming across. I don't know how good the internet connection is going to be here. It was so earlier. I think good enough, not great. So let me know if you're having problems or not. And those of you in the chat, just give it a thumbs up or give it something to let me know everything looks and sounds good. I'm in Tbilisi. I've done 2 events in Tbilisi, a third tomorrow on Friday. I did a talk yesterday. I did a talk at Free University, named after Freedom University, where I gave a talk about the morality of capitalism. About 100 people there, terrific reception. I know both the rector of the university and the owner of the university. It's kind of a private nonprofit, I think, but great friends, great supporters, and whenever I'm in Tbilisi, they organize a talk for me, so it was great. It was great to meet students, talk to students, and also some alumni who maybe heard me speak a few years ago, and were back for more. So it was a lot of fun and good to be here today. I did a talk as part of the Free Market Roadshow. Free Market Roadshow, I think I've told you about this when I did my show in Prague, but the Free Market Roadshow basically takes a group of intellectuals, usually about 4, and then we travel from city to city to city, and we do a program. And I did my talk today on why freedom. You know, there's this assumption that we should all care about freedom, we should all fight for freedom, and freedom's really, really important, and freedom's everything, but why? Why is freedom important? Important to whom? And for what? So I thought that went really well. Georgia's great because, so many people here follow me on Facebook and Twitter. They watch the show. They listen to podcasts. So I have a real following. The other thing that's interesting, and I'll get to this in a little while, is that you meet here a lot in Georgia. You meet a lot of people who have a deep knowledge of what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. You meet a lot of Ukrainians here. There are quite a few people who have joint citizenship between Ukraine and Georgia. For whatever reason, these two countries are associated and affiliated. And I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. And a lot of Ukrainians are living here, and a lot of Russians are living here. So about anywhere between 20 to 50,000 Russians have left Russia. They don't have anything to do with Putin. The Russian economy is tanking. Things are going really, really bad in Russia right now. They don't want to be associated with the war and support it in any way. So they're leaving Russia. There's clearly a brain drain happening in Russia. Some of them are going to Israel. Some of them are going, if they can, to Europe or different places in Europe. Many of them, somewhere between 20 to 50,000 of them, are coming here to Georgia, where they can, if they are programmers, or if they can work remotely, or they can start businesses, or they can, so rents are going up. Rents are really, really high in Tbilisi right now. A lot of students are having a hard time being able to afford the rent to go back to university because the Russians have driven up rents. The same thing, by the way, is happening in Israel. You can't rent a place in Israel because the Russians have flooded the place and are driving up rents. Anyway, so today I did a talk on why do we care about freedom? And hopefully somebody recorded it on the iPhone. Hopefully the video and audio quality are good enough. It's a short talk. It's like 15 minutes that I'll post it up on the channel once I get it. So and then I'm thinking of turning that into a longer talk. So one of my standard talks will be why freedom or why liberty, or if you guys have a really sexy, cool title for talks like that, let me know. Basically, my explanation for why is because you want to pursue your happiness. And if you want to pursue your happiness, living under freedom is the path. So I make it into kind of your selfish motivation. Jonathan, thank you. Jonathan says, you're on Brooke, the hardest working philosopher in show business. I guess I'm in show business. This is show business, right? So thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for the support. Thank you, Theme Master. We'll get to the questions in a minute. So let's see. Yes, so tomorrow I'll be doing a 3-hour talk seminar on kind of the morality and purpose and functioning of finance. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to start basically with Twitter, and I'm going to explain like Musk's takeover of Twitter, and then describe the financial history of Twitter. So that'll be a good illustration of what venture capital does, why Twitter went public and what the public markets do, what's the purpose of going public, how you raise money. And all of that will be a good illustration of the role financial markets make in a capitalist economy or in a market economy, and their productive function, the value that they present. So I'm going to use Twitter and maybe Moderna as two of my examples for this. So that'll be tomorrow. Since I last talked to you in Prague, I've given talks through this roadshow. We've done talks in Bratislava in Slovakia. My big beef with Slovakia is, it's like, I always complain to the people in Slovakia is, why do they exist? Why is there a country called Slovakia? Why weren't they happy being Czechoslovakia and having the Czech and the Slovaks one country? Ayn Rand wrote about this in her essay on balkanization, on every little ethnic group, every little linguistic group, every little whatever group, every little tribal group wanting their own country, and the disastrous consequences of that. And so I never understood why the Czech Republic and Slovakia are not one country. Again, the culture is so similar, language is very similar. It would be a bigger country, it would be more substantial, had a bigger economy, there'd be more options, there'd be more opportunities. In every respect, it would be good. Plus, Slovakia would have been benefited from the relative free market policies of the Czech Republic. Then from Slovakia, we flew to Poland and we did an event in Warsaw at the Liberty Pub. The Liberty Pub is a pub dedicated to liberty. It has a copy of Atlas Shrugged hung up among the bottles of liquor. It's clearly influenced by Atlas Shrugged. There's a Goltz gin as one of the cocktails. You can order a Goltz gin. I'm not sure what makes it a Goltz gin versus anybody else's gin. So we did an event there, and then finally we flew to Tbilisi. It was a kind of a horrible flight. Left Warsaw at midnight, landed in Tbilisi at around 5:30 a.m. So didn't really get any sleep that night. So I'm tired. It's been a journey, hopping from place to place to place to place. Trains and cars and trains, planes, and automobiles. Yes, trains, planes, and automobiles. Anyway, so that's what's been happening in the last week, just to fill you in. Now, as many of you know, I really like Georgia. I'm a big fan of Tbilisi. I'm a big fan of Georgia. Georgia is one of these countries that is unique in that in the mid-2000s, there was a government in Georgia that was basically dedicated to free markets. maybe the most radical government we have seen in the last 50, maybe in the last 100 years. I don't know, but clearly a really radical government. Not a government that kind of mealy-mouthed, freedom and liberty and free markets and it does nothing or spends like crazy. No, a government that absolutely, completely deregulated the economy. A government that in order to rid the country of corruption, basically fired every policeman in the country and started from scratch. And today, Georgia is not a very corrupt country, even though it used to be one of the most corrupt countries. It is a country that, for example, deregulated its health market. So it's right at the top of the most free market healthcare systems in the world. So in Georgia, you have private hospitals, private doctors, private insurance. You have, not perfect, but you have an incredibly free healthcare system, particularly as compared to its European neighbors. Well, not so neighbors, but to the rest of Europe. Interesting. Last night I had dinner with a couple of people from Free University, and they invited a friend, and this friend happened to be the only person in human history, as far as we can tell, who has been the health minister in 2 different countries. He was the health minister in Georgia in the mid-2000s and the man responsible for completely privatizing the Georgian health system. And he was the health minister in Ukraine post-2015. Not in the most recent government, but in the government before that. And in Ukraine, he tried to privatize the healthcare system, unsuccessfully, unfortunately. So it was fascinating to talk to him. So first, importantly, he's a man who was influenced by Atlas Shrugged. He's somebody who's read Atlas Shrugged, inspired by Atlas Shrugged, loved Atlas Shrugged, and to a large extent the free market ideology that he holds and implemented in a place like Georgia was a consequence of Atlas Shrugged. He's also a man that was influenced heavily by a famous Georgian who was part of that government in the early 2000s and was really the force, the power, the energy around completely liberalizing the Georgian economy. And they did amazing things. They privatized the healthcare system. They changed the educational system to de-emphasize public schools. It's not as we would like it to be, but it's again, much better than many other countries. They did away with things like workplace regulations, like food inspectors, many of the regulations that exist kind of everywhere, in every country. They did away with. And Georgia thrived. Georgia became one of the most successful countries in the world in terms of economic growth, in terms of success. And you go into Tbilisi and you can see that this was a very, very poor country that is slowly coming out of that poverty and succeeding, and to a large extent that is a consequence of the unbelievable liberalization that this country went through, primarily as a consequence of this guy, Kacha, and I can't pronounce his family name, who also founded Free University, owned Free University. His daughter today runs it. So Kacha is a real hero in Georgia, and I think a real hero to all of us. Yeah, Saba says, his name is Kacha. Yes, Kacha, but if you can write his family name in a way that I can pronounce it, I will do it justice and actually give him credit for it all. So Kacha's a legend, and you see photos of him everywhere where you go, where people value free markets. Everybody you talk to about free markets was his friend and associate and was inspired by him. And he was truly inspiring guy. Unfortunately, I didn't meet him by the time I arrived in Georgia, my first trip to Georgia. Unfortunately, he'd already passed away. This is, I think, my 5th trip to Georgia. The events here are always fantastic. The hospitality is amazing. The food and the wine are terrific. And I very much enjoy my visits to Georgia. So, if you're looking for people, particularly young people, inspired by the ideas of liberty, inspired by freedom, inspired by Ayn Rand, places like Ukraine, places like Georgia, places like Poland, Eastern European, former communist Eastern European countries are places where you'll find more of that than you will in France or Germany or even in the United States, I think, on a per capita basis. So it's a lot of fun. It's inspiring. I encourage you guys to travel. I encourage you guys to come to Eastern Europe. Visit, for example, in Poland. There, as I said, there's the Liberty Lounge, the Liberty Pub. Go get a beer at the Liberty Pub. Get a Gold's Gin. Talk to them about Ayn Rand. Talk to them about free market ideas. I think it will inspire you. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow doing this finance seminar here. From here, I fly to Tallinn in Estonia. I've never been to Estonia, so this will be my first visit. So I'm really looking forward to that. Where I'll be doing a talk on, I think, energy, free markets in energy, particularly in the European context and dependence on Russia. Then from there, I'm going to go to UK, where I'm giving a talk at Oxford. I'm giving a talk at a high school in London, and then I'm giving a talk at the Institute for Economic Affairs for the Hayek Society of the LSE and the Hayek Society of King's College. So busy week, busy couple of weeks, and then after that, I'm going to be on vacation a little bit. Going to relax, going to enjoy London, going to go eat at good restaurants, go see some concerts, maybe a play or two, and then off to Spain to spend some time with my wife. All right, let's see. Okay, coming in. All right. Anyway, that's a quick update on kind of Georgia, travels, where I am, and all of that. The first topic I want to talk about quickly is Ukraine. I have pretty strong opinions about Ukraine and about Russia and about what is going on in Ukraine. I'm clearly anti-Russia. I think Russians are the villains, unequivocally the villains. I think Ukraine, with all its faults, with all its problems, is definitely the good guys. They are the good guys in this conflict. And, it's nice to talk to people who actually have lived in Ukraine. It's nice to talk to people in Georgia who, in a sense, they don't have a stake in Ukraine, but they have a stake with regard to Russia. So you talk to Georgians, and of course Georgia was invaded by a big chunk of Georgia was taken by the Russians, declared an autonomous region, and taken for Russia. As somebody said in one of the talks today, there are literally Russian troops an hour from where I am right now, an hour from my hotel room. There are Russian tanks, there are Russian troops, there are Russian missiles, there are Russian artillery. An hour from Tbilisi. Russia in this area is the aggressor. Russia in this area are the imperialists. Russia in this area is the bully. And if you don't know whether what you're reading in the mainstream media in America is true or not, come to Georgia and talk to some Georgians about Russia, and you'll get a little bit of perspective. Now, the interesting thing is that the Georgian government is so afraid of Russia that they are borderline pro-Russia, and they've not taken a stand, certainly not taken a stand against Russia. So don't forward me the nonsense propaganda coming out of Russia in terms of that they're the victim, that they did this because NATO. First of all, any country has a right to form any alliances it wants. Ukraine was an autonomous country. It did not have to ask Russia's permission to join NATO or any other alliance. People talk about the Azov Brigade being neo-Nazis. Yeah, in 2014, there were some neo-Nazis associated with them, maybe even some of their leadership. But, the current leadership is, the current Azov Brigades are run by a couple of Georgians. I asked people who know them, hey, are these guys neo-Nazis? No. There were some bad apples. They might still be bad apples. There might still be neo-Nazis in the Azov Brigade. But the brigade in and of itself is not neo-Nazis. So all of that is nonsense. The Georgians here, everybody I talk to, there's one unanimous view, and that is that Ukraine has to win this, and that the best thing that could happen, not only for Georgia, but for Western Europe is for Ukrainians to kick ass, to really defeat and destroy the Russians, to push the Russians back. That would embolden the Georgians, that would embolden other oppressed people in this area, that will shrink the bully back to size. And I think they're absolutely right. The best thing that could happen is for Ukraine to win this war. And I have to say that I completely support the Biden administration and the other Western countries that are sending troops to Ukraine and helping the Ukrainians through providing them with weapons to defeat the Russians in any way that they can. Russia is an evil player in this region. It needs to be put down. It needs to be put down. This regime needs to be destroyed. And Russia's neighbors need to be liberated from fear. And Ukraine right now, amazingly, is in a position to do exactly that. Wes Stewart, $50 just showing support. Thank you for the shows. Absolutely. Thank you, Wes. Really appreciate it. As you know, you can use the Super Chat to ask questions or just support the show like Wes did. We try to raise $600 every show. I know because I do these shows last minute, because the timing of the show is not super convenient and not a lot of people watching live. We're unlikely to reach $600 today, but anything you do is greatly appreciated. The Yaron Brook Show has lost significant revenue as I travel around Europe and as I was sick in the middle of April, so that we haven't done as many shows and we haven't generated as much income as we have in the past. I don't think anybody's keeping track of the dollars today, but I think we're probably at 100 and maybe 150, maybe 140, 130, something like that. Thomas Schubata says, Evgeny Kissin's essay needs 100,000 reprints. It needs 100 million reprints. It needs to be, everybody needs to read it. It needs to be distributed widely. And I think it would be viewed very positively in Eastern Europe and in places like Georgia. But it needs to get out there. It needs to be distributed. And it's truly, it was truly a brilliant essay. It's the one I read to you when I was in Prague. Really inspiring, really fantastic. One other thing I want to say about Ukraine, and this may be controversial, but I've been thinking about this a lot for a variety of reasons. But I'll just say this: I don't believe, and I've hinted at this in the past, so I don't think this is a big change of mind. I don't like the policy of sanctions against individuals, particularly when those individuals are businessmen, even when those individuals are oligarchs. And the reason for that is that I don't trust the government, our governments, to identify who are the oligarchs or who are just businessmen. I don't trust our governments to identify who should be sanctioned and who should not. No, it looks like we've got. Let me know if the video is still working. Anyway, no trade, no diplomatic relations. I mean, they should be just boycotted, but not individuals picked and then boycotted. And now it's not even boycott. It's gotten much worse. Western countries are literally confiscating their wealth. They're stealing their stuff without due process, without the rule of law, without providing evidence or proof to any kind of establishment that they are justified in seizing this property. So I don't know if you read about the story of one of the oligarchs had his yacht go to Fiji, and the American government is going to Fiji and arranging with Fiji, and they're going to take the yacht, they're going to sell it, and the money is not going to go into some trust that the oligarch can get one day. No, the money is now the United States government's money. And that is true now. There's talk about this happening even for financial assets, where certain jurisdictions are literally seizing the assets, taking them from the oligarchs, not freezing them, but taking them. The oligarchs will never see them again. Now, again, I have no sympathy for bad guys, people who chain their wealth through theft or through, manipulating the system to get it at the expense of other people. But if you're going to take somebody's money, somebody's yacht, somebody's wealth, somebody's companies, whatever it happens to be, you better have proof that they were the bad guy. You better have a legal system that allows him to defend himself. You better have a legal system that arbitrates objectively about who gets punished. But today we have a system where the UK sanctions some people, the United States sanctions other people, the Cayman Islands sanctions the same as the UK mostly. The Isle of Jersey does something else. This jurisdiction does that. Israel does something else. China, whatever, does it. It's absurd. And each one decides, I wonder whose money I can take today. I wonder how much can be taken. So I become very anti-sanctions as a consequence. Again, embargo, don't let them in, don't let them in. Put them on trial. Put them on trial. If they've violated the law, they've stolen, they've exploited, they've done something. But you can't just confiscate arbitrarily. You can't, I don't trust the government to not be arbitrary in terms of who they confiscate from and who not. So much of it, if you leave it up to the government, is going to be based on who you know. Who's got more influence? Who's got more say? Okay, so I just want to say that about Russian sanctions. Again, that does not mitigate in any respect my complete support for the Ukrainians and my complete disgust at what Russia is doing, and everything about this Russian regime, this Russian leadership is disgusting, offensive, immoral. All right, so before I go to the Super Chat questions, we've got quite a few of them. And we are $200, so we've got a few because we've got a lot of little ones, but we do have quite a few questions. We'll get to those in a minute. One of them says, Viktor Suvov said that the GRU used these yachts to move stolen Western military equipment. Okay, prove it. You can't just state it and then act on it and just confiscate it without evidence, without some kind of legal process. There has to be some objective legal process that says these are bad guys, those are not. Now, they might be Putin's puppets. If they're Putin's puppets, take everything from them, right? But there has to be a process by which you decide who to believe and who not, who to sanction and who not, who to take this stuff and who not. And right now, the process is not objective. Not objective. And just boycott them. Tell them they can't come into your country. Don't give them visas. Don't allow them into your airports. Whatever. All kinds of things to isolate them. I just don't like this notion of arbitrarily seizing their wealth, seizing their assets. Whether it's justifiable or not needs to be determined by some kind of objective rule of law, not by some kind of emergency powers that Biden or Johnson is a big dictator. These guys are little dictators. All right. I'm not sure the internet connection is going to hold for very long. So I will, if I lose you guys, I will save the Super Chat questions and I'll answer them another time for not answering them today. Okay, let's see. I wanted to comment on two quick things. I don't think this will take long. I did want to note that earlier this week, the Treasury Department announced, not by a lot, 1.4%, but still, you have negative GDP growth in the quarter, which does not bode well. That's before the Federal Reserve started increasing interest rates significantly. You're going to see many more increases moving into the months ahead. So we've already entered a very, very weak economic times even before the Fed starts sucking money out of the economy and raising interest rates. There is a recession. It seems that it's coming. What is surprising is that it's coming faster than what people expected. I think the general expectation, my expectation was that the Fed was trying to delay the recession until after the midterms. We could get a recession before the midterms. If we get a recession before the midterms, it's likely that the Republican sweep will be even bigger than what we have now. And at the pace at which the Fed is raising interest rates, very slow pace, we're likely to have, at least over a period, stagflation, where you have both economic contraction and inflation. So we will see, but it's very bad economic news. And again, I don't think you need me to tell you that all of this is a consequence of statism, of government intervention in the economy, of central planning, all the way. So our economy is starting to shrink. Scary, given that there's no, this is not because of the war, right? The war would not cause it to shrink. Energy prices are going up, but that in and of itself is not enough to bring the United States into a recession. This is something deeper, more meaningful. It is a complete change in sentiment. Some of that might be part of war, but I think it's much more than that. I think it's inflation. I think it's people's response to the inflation. People are afraid. Entrepreneurial activity shrinks during inflation. People were spending last year quite a bit. It was in the first quarter quite a bit. But whether entrepreneurial activity was keeping up, whether businesses were expanding, and obviously there are real weaknesses in the economy, and we might get a recession earlier than we expect. Okay, finally, I want to talk about this evil proposal by not proposal, it's a done deal by the Biden administration. I often criticize the right for hyperbole, for being hysteric, for taking things out of proportion, for attacking the left in a kind of hysterical way. Well, here, go for it. You can be as hysterical as you want because it's justified. So earlier this week, the Department of Homeland Security told Congress that the agency was creating a, quote, disinformation governance board to combat, quote, misinformation, they say coming from Russia as we near the year's midterm election. So this committee will be headed by a disinformation fellow. I think they should call her a disinformation czar, or even better, I think they should call her a truth czar. Of course, she comes from a leftist think tank named after Woodrow Wilson. Look, there is nothing more important than free speech. There's no value more important fighting for than free speech. And as I've said over and over and over again, it is only really government that can censor. I don't consider what happens on Twitter a free speech issue, although you could say censorship by proxy, maybe, but then you'd have to prove that it was by proxy. But explicit government intervention in free speech, explicit government sanction of speech, like DeSantis did to Disney. And I know a lot of you didn't like the show I did where I condemned DeSantis, but you know what? Tough. You guys don't understand what liberty and freedom require. And DeSantis didn't take any particular rights and privileges Disney had. On the contrary, Disney just had the ability to govern the property that it owned. It had property rights. It was freer. You didn't take any privilege they had. You took away their freedom. DeSantis took away their freedom because they said something he didn't like. But now, and by the way, he's one of the biggest critics of this Biden Disinformation Governance Board. Yes, Nathan, you were reading my mind. This is exactly what I was going to talk about. This is a true evil. And look, I'm not worried about what Biden's going to do with it. It's going to be pretty weak. It's going to be ineffectual. It's in the Department of Homeland Security, which is impotent. They won't know what to do with it. They don't know what to do with it. What's scary is the precedent. What's scary is that you've created a board in Department of Homeland Security, a department that explicitly has guns, that is responsible for what is true and what is not, what is information and what is disinformation. You're getting the government involved directly into issues of speech that they have no business in. You're getting the government involved directly into what is true and what is not true. And we know that almost everything coming out from a politician's mouth is a lie. We know that Biden lies all the time. We know that Trump made lying an art form. We know that every one of these politicians lie. Will they ever label their lies disinformation? Of course not. But who will they label disinformation? Well, their critics. This is the direct attack on freedom, a direct attack on liberty, a direct attack on the fundamental principle, on the fundamental value that undermines liberty and freedom. And that is the ability to think, the ability to speak, the ability to government this power. This is the ultimate evil. I don't have a problem with Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or any of these private platforms deciding what they carry and what they don't carry. I'd like it to be more objectively presented so I know what they will carry and what they won't. But when it's the government's doing, it is beyond the pale. God, I've just lost half of the people watching live. Just disappeared. Did I say something that offended anybody? Maybe I said something nasty about Trump and that scared them away. Now, what scares me is not what the Biden administration is going to do with it. It's going to be a joke coming out of the Biden administration. They can't get anything right. All right, the connection is wonky. I apologize if it's glitching, and the connection is not great. But I'm using the bandwidth I have. The bandwidth is not great here, so it is what it is. So sorry about that. Hopefully you're still all online. It's still going. So what scares me is that once you establish an agency like this, it will never go away. No administration is going to come into office and do away with it. And I challenge DeSantis now, publicly. And you should do it on Twitter. You should all challenge DeSantis on Twitter. DeSantis has come out, did a press conference today condemning this department, condemning this new disinformation department, condemning it as truth czar and agency of truth. Well, DeSantis, do you commit to bind yourself to this commitment that if you become president of the United States, you will dismantle this entity? Now, I think we should demand that of everybody running for president, certainly anybody on the Republican side. A commitment to dismantling this, because what scares me is how this will be used by Republicans in the future. I mean, do you think Donald Trump would want to dismantle this? Or would he want to use this against the Washington Post? Against any enemy he could find, or against anybody who criticizes him, against anybody who claims that he is lying or wrong. What scares me is when you have an effectual president, somebody who knows what they're doing, using this as a tool to destroy their... And that could change. This is an incredibly dangerous thing. This is something we should be talking about. This is something we should be demanding our politicians to commit that if they win the presidency, they will dismantle it. They will get rid of it. This should be a primary focus for all of us, to get rid of this agency. It is truly evil, truly destructive, truly undermining of everything that the Founding Fathers created in this country. All right, I think that's it. I think I'll do the questions now. We'll do some super chat. I am tired. I apologize, but I'm tired. Also, I know the internet connection is not that good. In spite of being one of the first people to come out against it, I'm going to bet that he does not dismantle it, but maybe changes its name, but uses it. It's about power. And politicians never reduce their own power. They never dismantle agencies that give them more power. It is late here, guys. It is 20 to 11. All right. So where are we? We're at about $250. So we're 350 short of our goal of 600. Again, I'm not surprised given that we don't have that many people watching live, given the time and the almost no notice. I'm going to go through these questions and then I'm going to go to bed. Good call, Christopher. All right, Theme Master asks, hi, Yaron. I've had COVID for 2 days. And since today, I'll be taking vitamin C and D3, elemental zinc, quercetin, NAC, lots of water and ventilation, which was advice from Roger Siholt, MD. Was there anything else you took that helped? I'm looking into a pulse oximeter test to see if I'm good for antibiotics, for antibodies, but not sure I can get them from UK. I would get, but I would get them today since you're only 2 days into this. You've got to hit this early. Is get the Pfizer medication. I forget what it's called, Praxaloid. But if you take Praxaloid as soon as you get COVID symptoms, it's the best medication you could have for COVID. So get Praxaloid, the sooner the better. If you can, in the United States, they're sitting at the pharmacy shelf and nobody's using them for some silly reason. But it's better than all the things you're taking. COVID is Paxlovid. Ian says Paxlovid. It's a pill. It's an antiviral. It's put out by Pfizer. And clinical trials were amazing, just amazing in terms of how well the pill worked. So I encourage you. Nothing really helped me. I mean, it was a bad cold. I mean, I took the vitamin D, I took the vitamin C, I took the zinc. I don't think any of them helped. I think basically it just overcame it. It was a bad cold and it went away. But Paxlovid, definitely take that. By far, I think, from all the trials I've seen, that is the best. By the way, have you guys seen the latest article? What was the name of the drug that everybody was claiming was the miracle drug against COVID? The one that was an ivermectin. Thank you, ivermectin. I don't know if you've seen, but there is the latest journal article about ivermectin, a comprehensive, large study done in Brazil where ivermectin was plentiful and was given to a lot of patients by doctors, showed that ivermectin had no effect, none, zero, nada, on preventing hospitalization. That is, once you got COVID and you took ivermectin, the same number of people controlling for other factors as you do the empirics properly, controlling for other factors, same number of people ended up in hospital in the group that took ivermectin, the same number of people didn't. Ivermectin is completely bogus as treatment for COVID. And I think we knew that months and months ago, but people are still holding on. And I still see people prescribing it, and I still see people swearing by it and taking it and engaged by it. A big study, thousands of people from Brazil, which was very pro-ivermectin and was handing out ivermectin like it was candy. It didn't work, guys. It didn't work. All right, let's see. The paper was published in the New England Journal of Medicine a couple of weeks ago. So just looked up ivermectin, New England Journal of Medicine, or look ivermectin Brazil study, or you could Google in a number of different ways, you'll find it. I saw the study a couple of weeks ago. I was going to mention it, but I forgot, plus I'm sick of the whole topic. And then it came up on my Google News feed just the other day. So, and since we were talking about COVID, it prompted me to think about it. But you can find it online pretty easily. Yeah, ivermectin doesn't hurt you, but why take stuff that isn't helping you? Ivermectin doesn't help you. So I don't take stuff that's not going to help me, where the science is pretty clear that it's not going to help me. All right, we'll have to do that another time. Let's see, $5 question, $20 question. We are all so fragile. Life is fragile, and yet simultaneously survive so much. Yes, life is fragile, but importantly, we can survive. Human beings are very good at survival. I mean, a lot of people survived Auschwitz. But the point is, we don't just want to survive. We want to achieve the best life possible to man. And for that, we need freedom. And this is my talk today that I gave on why freedom. Why freedom? Because I want to live. Live with a capital L. I want to be happy. I want to thrive. And to thrive, you need to be able to make choices. You need to be able to pursue your values. You need to be able to be free to do what you think is right. If you want to take ivermectin, take ivermectin. Not that that will lead to happiness, quite the contrary. So, freedom is crucial. Freedom is essential. By the way, I think one of Freedom was making fun of me by saying Dr. Brooke. I am a Dr. Brooke, not a medical doctor. I do come from a family of doctors, so the Dr. Brooke, my dad, would back everything I said about ivermectin up. But the fact is I am a doctor, and one of the things I studied as a doctor is statistics and how to look at papers and how to evaluate papers. I'm not a healthcare physician, but I can read a paper and see if the methodology makes sense and the methodology doesn't make sense. That I can do, at least to some extent. So you can make fun of me all you want as a Dr. Brooke, but I can tell when a study is completely nonsense, and I can tell when a study is reasonable. Not to the nth degree, but to a point. And I can tell when people writing about particular studies, when we're dealing with statistics, are good and when they're not. And I've tried to do that throughout COVID. Many of you ignored it, but all I can give you is the best analysis I can provide, not more than that, based on the fact that I am a doctor of finance with some study of statistics. All right, we are at, $300. Be great if we could raise another $300. That would be fantastic. So if anybody wants to put in a big chunk of money to wrap up April, get us in April over there. Oh, there's Ragnar of the Desert, just did that. Thank you, Ragnar of the Desert. I don't have to bug you guys anymore. Ragnar often does that, just comes in, gets us to the target, and so thank you, really appreciate that. All right, Ashton, for $50 asks, history has shown that when nations use reason and rational moral behavior in conducting warfare, they end up victorious. Putin and his armies have showed neither reason nor good moral behavior. Therefore, their defeat in Ukraine is inevitable. I'd say more than that. And I said this on the first day of the war. Authoritarian regimes are not good at war. It's not an accident Hitler lost. It's not an accident the Soviet Union collapsed. Over the long run, authoritarianism is not sustainable. People talk about sustainability. The most sustainable thing is freedom and capitalism. Authoritarianism is not sustainable. It is destructive. It cannot produce. It cannot create. It cannot innovate. It cannot expand. So it produces inferior products, inferior weapons. It produces soldiers with low morale. It has to lose because it's authoritarian. And the moral is the practical. Immoral systems don't work. They don't work in peacetime and they don't work in wartime. They don't work. So I have no doubt that Russia will ultimately lose. And in one way or another, I think they've already lost. As I've told you, if the goal was to keep NATO away, they've lost because Finland and Sweden are likely to become NATO members. If their goal was to quickly defeat the Ukrainians and replace the regime there, they have lost because they didn't achieve that. If their goal was to show how mighty their military is and to force other countries to cower before them, they have lost because all they've proven to the world is how pathetic their military is and how badly equipped it is. If their goal was to show how good their weapons are so they could sell them to other countries, they've lost. Nobody should buy their MiG planes and their T-80s or T-90s or T-72s because they're pathetic and awful. What everybody should buy is Western military equipment that is so easily defeating the Russian equipment. So I just read an interview with an F-35, the American top of the line stealth fighter. F-35 about his estimation of the American Air Force, or the American Air Force versus the Russian Army generally. And his assessment was the same as my assessment from a few weeks ago. If the United States was in this war, in a conventional war, it would crush the Russians easily. The F-35 is light years ahead of anything the Russians have, anything the Chinese have, but certainly anything the Russians have. They wouldn't even know how to deal with it. The F-35 was designed to evade the anti-aircraft missiles that the Russians have, the S-400, their most advanced system, although they just rolled out the S-500, but I don't think it matters. And it has the ability, as soon as an S-400 battery pings it, tries to search it, it can identify the battery, send a missile, and destroy it. So Air Force equipped with F-35s would destroy all of the anti-aircraft capacity that the Russian army has, basically dominate the airspace, destroy their fighters, destroy their anti-aircraft missiles, and make their Air Force completely and utterly useless. And without an Air Force, there's no way a modern army can win. All right. Anyway, I don't even remember how we got to that topic. Oh, we've got more $20 questions here. How did I skip these? Okay, Colt Savage asks, I felt betrayed by the conservatives and libertarians in support of Russia. However, the ordinary conservative in my community has been supportive of Ukraine. Is there a disconnect between pundits and ordinary people? Absolutely. But it's only some pundits. Most of the pundits support Ukraine. But there is an element of, particularly on the Trump side, but there is an element of nationalist paleo-conservatives and nationalist paleo-libertarians, although that should be a contradiction in terms, who are anti-freedom, who are anti-Western, who are fundamentally anti-American. They're associated on the libertarian side with the von Mises Institute. They're associated on the Republican side, on the conservative side, with national conservatives, with the Catholic, with the new Catholic traditionalists. These are people who are fundamentally anti the America of the Founding Fathers. They are all religious, both the libertarians and the conservatives. And they're anti-liberty. They're anti-freedom. They're nationalists. They're traditionalists. They're religionists. So it is shocking and unthinkable that so many conservatives have now unmasked themselves and revealed their real soul, their real nature. Your position on Russia reveals a lot. Russia are the bad guys here. And if you can't see that, if you can't see the initiation of force is evil, if you can't see that Russia is not acting in self-defense, but is initiating force against its neighbor, then you better get a good pair of glasses. Glasses for the brain. Why do they support Russia? They support Russia because they admire strongmen. They support Russia because Putin is anti-woke. They support Russia because they admire Putin's strength, although he's proved to be pretty pathetic. But they admire his use of muscle, his use of force. They admire the fact that he's willing to kill his opponents, to silence them. They admire him in order to promote his cause. They admire him because he's anti-freedom and anti-liberty and anti-liberalism, because they reject liberalism. Liberalism in the positive sense, classical liberalism. They reject individualism. So why? Why do they love Russia? Because they're anti-individualist, collectivist, nationalist, irrationalist mystics. That's why. Okay, Liam asks, have you read Immanuel Kant's essay, Perpetual Peace? This insanity seems to be the standard for dealing with foreign aggressors. No, I have not read Kant's essay on Perpetual Peace, sorry. And I'm not sure which insanity you're talking about. Appeasement? So I'm not sure exactly which. Thomas Schubadam says, but what about the poor? Well, the poor are better under liberty and freedom under capitalism. And Bree says, if you were only concerned about the poor, would you fight inflation or recession? I think inflation is more damaging than recession, but it's a close call. Biden will not do either or make both worse. I don't think you have an option. I think you have to fight inflation, even if you're only concerned about the poor, because you have to think long term. And long term means fighting inflation, and then once recession happens caused by the inflation, fighting recession. You have to take them sequentially. You have no option. So here you have to think long term versus short term. Both are damaging to the poor and to everybody else short term. Long term, you have to deal with both elements. And the first one to deal with, because it's easiest, is to deal with inflation. It's relatively easy to deal with inflation. Why should Ukraine, so somebody says if Ukraine chose neutrality, why should Ukraine choose neutrality? If it's not neutral, if the Ukrainian people don't want to be neutral, if they want to be affiliated with the West, if they are afraid that Russia would invade them even if they're neutral, not an unfounded fear, why should they be neutral? Why shouldn't they sign a defense pact with people who feel similar to them, like the Poles, NATO in other words, who fear Russian aggression? Why should they give in to the Russian demands to be neutral? Why does Russia have legitimate demands? It doesn't. It's an authoritarian, aggressive state. It invaded Georgia. Was Georgia a threat to Russia? Have you ever seen how small Georgia is relative to Russia? How small the population of Georgia is relative to Russia? I mean, Ukraine is mighty and huge and massive population as compared to Georgia. And yet, the Russians invaded Georgia. And once the Russia invades Georgia and then took Crimea, any rational individual would fear that Russia would be an aggressor. So, why its own fate? Why is Ukraine excluded from the right to decide who to ally itself with, who to sign treaties with? Why is Ukraine have to be relegated to being under the boot of Russia, which is what neutrality means? Because what if Russia does something to Ukraine that Ukraine doesn't like? Well, it has to be neutral. And it can't ask for anybody's help because it has to be neutral. It's absurd and ridiculous for any country in the world to declare itself neutral. Is Finland and Sweden really neutral? So Russia is the bad guy here, unequivocally. Neutrality is not a value. And to force somebody to be neutral? Why? Why should any individual, if you as an individual are neutral between people who want to help you and people who want to hurt you, you should be neutral between the two. People who want to shoot you and people who want to, maybe the police to protect you, of course you're not neutral. Nobody should be neutral. There is no such thing as neutrality. And neutrality in this case doesn't mean neutrality. It means the boot of Russia on your neck. It means doing what Putin tells you to do. It means subjugating your own people to foreign authoritarian. To compare the United States to Russia is dishonest. It's an utter dishonesty, and this is what conservatives and paleo-libertarians do. With all the United States problems, with all the difficulties, the United States is 1,000,000 times better than Russia in every aspect, and 1,000,000 times freer than Russia. So if you're going to be under anybody's influence, wouldn't you rather be under the influence of a free, relatively free Western country than under the dictatorship, authoritarianism of a Putin? Yeah. I find the whole, I find the whole support for Russia truly, truly offensive. All right, a bunch of $5, $10 questions. Jacob, thank you. Really appreciate the support. We at 600. We could go to 1,000, guys. There's nothing stopping us, so feel free. Okay, quickly. How do you manage jet lag? Sleep, melatonin. Sleep and melatonin. So I try to, if it's a night flight to Europe, I try to drag out the day and go to sleep the first day at night with melatonin. Second night with melatonin, just to get my body into the rhythm of the right hours. The problem in this trip is both I took a day flight, which kind of screwed me up. Then I watched a basketball game because I watched the Celtics late into the night. So I went to sleep really, really late. So I missed kind of the cycle. And then the flight to Tbilisi screwed up my schedule again. So I've been battling jet lag and just being tired most of this trip. But you know, it hasn't been awful, and it doesn't affect my ability to lecture and to give talks. And tomorrow I'm speaking for 3 hours, and I think we'll be fine. Okay, Michael asks, what's the difference between moods and emotions? I think moods are more complicated phenomena of consciousness. They're combinations of moods, their state of consciousness. For example, happiness is more similar to a mood, I think, than to an emotion. It's a state of consciousness, more complex, combination of emotions. Emotions overlay it. Emotions are more short-term, moods are more long-term. But their source is very similar, I think. They're a response to estimation of values. Wyatt says, Rand said to condemn without giving reasons is the act of irresponsibility, a kind of moral hit and run. Is that at odds with ARI's views of schism? No, not at all. Not at all. You know, I'm not sure why you think it's at odds, in what way it's at odds, right? Before the other side made the conflict public, we didn't condemn publicly, right? We knew the reasons we were doing what we were doing internally. We didn't make any of it public. We didn't deem it worthy of making public. We didn't think it was necessary to make it public. We separated from these other people, did our own thing. They did their thing. They made it public. So, and I think, and the point that we are making is that that we don't need to condemn them, because I think if you read what they wrote, attacking me and attacking the Ayn Rand Institute, they condemn themselves. I think it's pretty clear that they're the bad guys, that what they wrote was not objective, that what they wrote was nonsense and anti-objectivist and just ridiculous. But you judge, you know. And you know, even now we've given a few reasons, but the reasons is their statement. Go read their statement. That's the reason. I don't need to give you more than that. If you can't figure out why they are not people worthy of dealing with, based on what they say, then I'm not sure I can help you. And again, I'm not interested in getting into these discussions, getting into these debates and analyzing them. It's just a waste of my time, and I think a waste of your time. Read it, figure it out for yourself. If you want to condemn me or shun me, fine. If you want to, but decide. Too many people are trying to straddle, and I think there's enough information out there to make a decision. Michael asks, how was Plato able to advocate collectivism without altruism? I think the way you get around that is to believe that what we need altruism, we need to be guided by philosophy kings. We need to do what we are told because we are blind to the truth. We're incapable of knowing the truth. We're in the cave, and we have no choice but to rely on the expertise of the philosopher king to guide us for our own betterment. So to achieve your own well-being as a ordinary person in the cave, you have to do what the philosopher kings tell you. So the motivation to be subservient was not sacrifice, was not pain. The motivation to be subservient was the incapacity of your reason to know reality, to know the truth, and to take care of yourself. And therefore the metaphysical dependence that you had, the epistemological dependence that you had on the philosopher king. That's my quick explanation. Michael says, is the ACLU an overall good organization? Not anymore. They used to be, because they used to defend free speech. They won't defend free speech anymore. They're useless. Michael asks, mysticism seems to be easier to challenge than altruism. Why is that? Because it's sillier. It's more self-evident. It's more anti-science, and people like science, and people latch onto science. So I think that's the reason. Altruism has you need an alternative, and it's not clear to them what the alternative is and how you come up with an alternative. It's not clear that altruism, to them, that it's anti-science. To me, it's obvious it's anti-science, but it's obvious the anti-science aspect to it. James says, this is $20. How do you not let the haters get you down and discourage you? Does it ever feel like it's you against the world? Yeah, all the time. The biggest, you're constantly fighting against the world. On this chat, how many people here on the chat are completely ignorant or evading the things that I'm hopefully teaching, communicating, and conveying? It's super frustrating. But it's not discouraging, because at the end of the day, look, if I didn't have an influence on anybody, I would stop doing this. It would be too depressing. So, for example, today I was at this free market roadshow event, and I'm walking down the corridor. I'm walking towards the bathrooms in the corridor, and this young, turns out Ukrainian girl, runs up to me. Oh, Yaron, Brooke, I'm so happy to meet you. You've changed my life. I've read all of Ayn Rand's. I listened to your stuff. I've heard your lectures. I love what you do. I came just to hear you speak. This is so amazing. Can I get a selfie? I mean, that's it. That makes my life. That makes it all worthwhile. To hell with the people who don't get it. Their problem, not mine. Not mine. It's the people who get it that I care about. It's the people who get it that motivate me. It's somebody here, what is it? SHRFM, I can't pronounce it. Says, change my life, Yaron. Yeah. It's for you, the people I changed, who I had a positive impact, not just changed life, just positive impact. It's for you that I do this. It's for me, right? But it's for your feedback that I do this. Not then. After the event today, we were standing around at the New Economics Center, which is this free market think tank within the University of Georgia, where they have all of Ayn Rand's books in English, and then a bunch of books translated to Georgian. They have all of my books. They have John Allison's book. They have Greg Salmieri's book. They have all these objectivist books. They're surrounding them. And we're talking, and one of the guys who's a professor now, he's a teacher, he says, I when I was a student here at the university, I came to see you speak 6-7 years ago. And, implicit in that was that you're inspiring. And both the professors, two professors said, a lot of our students follow you. A lot of our students are inspired by you. A lot of our students are reading Ayn Rand because of you. These are people that I'll never meet, people that never say thank you to me. But just knowing that's what it's all about. That's the optimism. That's why I'm positive about the future. To hell with the pro-Putin, pro-Russia apologists on this board who are completely irrational, or the Biden administration, or whatever. They're not what matters to me. What matters to me are the people I'm having an influence on, and I am having a huge impact on people out there, and so is ARI, and so is Ayn Rand, or primarily Ayn Rand. Me and ARI getting them to read Ayn Rand, and it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Again, one of the people at the session today came up and I've come to your talks in the past in Georgia. I mean, it inspires me. This is great. I'm so motivated. That's what it's all about. Thank you, anonymous user. I appreciate that. Okay, Michael asks, is the Fifth Amendment legitimate? If you commit a crime, why do you have a right to remain silent? It's an issue of recriminating yourself. You have a right you cannot be forced to speak, to act. You cannot be forced to recriminate yourself. I think it is legitimate. Do I have an explanation right now exactly why? No, on the show with me. Ian Mirkat says, the people calling me a filthy Zid are always Putinists, never Banderites? Who are Banderites? I don't know who Banderites are. Yeah, well, Putinists are pretty awful people. Harper Campbell says, not every nation has a right to a future. Not every race has a right to exist. That's Adolf Hitler. Karl Marx thought something very similar, by the way, in terms of races. He thought certain, I think he didn't like the Slavs. He thought the Slavs didn't have a right to exist. Anyway, he had a very similar view. Putin is basically modeling himself after the Fuhrer. I think that's right. I very much, if you want Nazis, the real Nazi is Putin. Putin is as close to as Nazi as a political leader as we have today. He is about ethnic cleansing. He is about destroying a whole people. He is about Mother Russia and the Russian spirit. I gave you quotes from some of his speeches about the mysticism, very similar to the kind of mysticism that Hitler used in describing the Aryan race. Leah Miller says, poverty doesn't exist under capitalism, it's the creation of state. Well, it does exist under capitalism. But the poor under capitalism are the deserving poor. People who are lazy, people who screw up their lives, people who make bad decisions, they land up poor. So poverty exists under capitalism, but under capitalism, overwhelming majority of the poor are poor because they caused it. Liam, it's annoying how slowly objectivism is winning. We need a thrust. Yep, absolutely. We do. Harper Campbell, where they burn books, so too will they in the end burn human beings. Yes, and Russia burns books. Thoughts on declawing cats or altering pets? I don't have any thoughts on this. I'm not a pet person. I don't know. It makes sense to me. I don't know how much pain is involved for the animal. It's a pet. You don't want to inflict pain on them. You want to be able to live decent lives. On the other hand, you don't want them scratching you and scratching your furniture. But I don't get pets. So pets are not my thing. I don't really have advice for that. Paul asks, did you see Richard Salzman's discussion in support of Russia's position? What is your opinion about it? I don't think Richard anymore has the capacity of cognition. I don't think he can think. I don't think he can, and you could see that in his discussion about Russia. The man cannot think anymore. He has lost his capacity to be rational. I think he lost it quite a while ago, but certainly over the last few years, he's become just an emotionalist zombie in some sense. So yeah, I think it was disgusting and awful, and the idea that he was a friend of mine once. And the idea that he was an objectivist once is horrific. He certainly is not objectivist today. Lyran asks, do you think the Russia will use nukes? What would be the proper response? I don't think Russia will use nukes. I think there's enough people. I think there are enough people in Russia that would stop whoever's in power from using the nukes. I think it would be suicidal, and I think the appropriate response would be basically to take out the nuclear capabilities of the Russians. I don't think you can stay silent to them using nukes. I think the primary target in a case like that should be every single nuclear silo that they have. And the challenge, of course, is how do you delimit it so that it doesn't bring about a complete launch of all their nuclear missiles, but it has to be the complete and utter destruction of the capacity of Russia to threaten anybody in the future. So how you do that exactly, I would have to know a lot more about the military capabilities of the United States, a lot more about our anti-missile technology, a lot more about our knowledge of where all his missiles are, a lot more about how many, for example, of his missiles in submarines, but nuclear missiles. So you would have to do an analysis, and I would say you would have to completely and utterly and unequivocally defang Russia. And if they use nuclear weapons, it becomes a problem for the United States because he has ballistic missiles pointed at the United States. You cannot allow him to, and once he shows that he's willing to use nukes, it has to be all-out destruction of the Soviet capability, and millions of people are going to die. Millions of Russians and probably millions of Westerners are going to die if you do that. But that is the cost of unbelievable irrationality and evil that would entail using nuclear weapons in this context. All right. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate the support. We made it to $600. We made it quite a bit over $600, $635. Of course, if you would like to support me, particularly those who don't watch live, the best way to support the Yaron Brook Show is yaronbrookshow.com/support. You can do it on Patreon or Subscribestar. About 500 to 600 of you support the show. There's these days there's about 5,000 of you that either listen or watch. So only about 10% of you actually support the show. So it would be fantastic if we got that up to 20% or 30%. So please consider, if you're if somebody who watches, almost all of you, watches the show not live and can't use a super chat, to go $2 a month, $10 a month. If you can do $100 or $250 or $500 a month, that's amazing. But whatever level you can afford it, whatever level you can, the support is greatly appreciated by me. It makes it possible for me to be part of your budget for living, all of it. This is my budget for living, right? This is my budget for living. So to the extent that you want to see me do more of this, you want to see me continue doing this, please support the show value for value. If you get value from me, show that by going on PayPal and supporting me. Thanks, everybody. I will see you, I don't know, maybe tomorrow. Might do a show tomorrow from Georgia again. If not, next show might be from Tallinn in Estonia. But I'm hoping to do a show tomorrow, 1st of May. It's a good day. It's a day the world celebrates communism. Maybe we can do. Brownie says, what's going faster, ARI or Atlas Society? I'll just say quickly, there's no competition. ARI is dramatically bigger than the Atlas Society and growing significantly faster than the Atlas Society. I think at the latest, the number of employees at the Ayn Rand Institute is somewhere between 60 to 70 people. It's larger today than when I was CEO. It's grown significantly. It's diversified. It's donor based. The Atlas Society is a fraction of the size of the Ayn Rand Institute. And all right, guys, as I said, have a great week. Have a great weekend. Hope you're enjoying your weekend. I'm sorry I didn't give you a lot of notice about today's show. I will try to give more notice in the future, but when I travel, it's very difficult. So there you go. Oh, yeah. See you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.